My name is Will, and this is Anissa, and we're two associates in Bird & Bird's IP team, and we're also two of the 4 editors of MediaWrites. Many of you here will know what MediaWrites is, but just by way of a brief introduction, it's the firm's media, entertainment, and sports news hub, where we talk about everything from gaming to sporting governance, content online, and a lot of the themes that are going to be covered off here tonight. This is the 4th MediaWrites Party that we've done, and speaking personally, this is one of the favorite bits about being the MediaWrites editor, that we get to organize it. It's great that we get to have it in such an amazing venue. Sorry about the pun. And the thing that makes it is that we have a really, really great turnout from right across the MES industry. So we're really looking forward to tonight. We've got a fantastic panel. Just wanted to say a quick hello and to introduce the panel.
Hi everyone. We appreciate this isn't the first and probably won't be the last event about NFTs and the Metaverse and Web3. But there's just so much to say about these topics, and our fantastic panel will be able to share some of their interesting insights based on their experiences of these technologies. And you'll get to ask them some questions after the main discussion, but we'd like to kick off the audience participation with a very short poll. It's 1 question. So you can access this on your phones at slido.com, which is SLIDO.com for those that can't see. And the access code is 9836923. And one more time, 9836923. And the question is, fad or future, which of these technologies is most likely to succeed? A, Metaverse, B, NFTs, C, Web3. I think that's the right order, but forgive me if it's not. And you can vote now or throughout the discussion, but without further ado, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to hand over to our colleague, Kat, and have a great night. Thank you.
Hi, guys. I am delighted to be your chair for the evening. My name is Kat Hughes, and I am an associate at Bird & Bird. And I am really excited to have a conversation with all of these lovely guys here with me. Also, just so you're aware, because Catherine will tell me to do this again, there is still prime real estate right at the front if anyone wants to be so bold. But yeah, so we've got with us today, we've got Karen, Ben, Kieran, Charlie, and Stefan. And if I could just ask you all just to do a brief intro so we know who you are, where you're from, and then we'll get right into it.
Start with me?
We will start with you.
Hi, I'm Karen Lowe, and I'm the managing director of a company called The Story Mob. We're a comms consultancy. We were founded about 5 years ago in LA and then opened an office in London just under 3 years ago now. We're rooted in gaming culture, so everybody that we work with is trying to engage with a gaming audience. Yeah, I think that's a good start.
I'm Ben. I run Tasso Advisory. We're a public policy consultancy. We focus mostly on technology, and so sometimes have to deal with how little government knows or thinks about the things that we're going to talk about tonight.
My name's Kieran. I'm the gaming director at Formula E. Formula E is the world's leading single-seater electric motorsport. I look after integration of Formula E IP into video games, and also am exploring the Web3 world on their behalf.
Hello, I'm Charlie Beale. I'm a consulting partner at 7 League. 7 League is a subsidiary of IMG Media. We advise clients on what they should be doing across their digital estate, everything from new and emerging technology through to traditional boring old Web 2 and how to make money out of the internet.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stefan Kovac. I run a Web3 advisory called Rarer Things. We've been in the space for about 5 years, and we work across sport. We do quite a lot in fashion, retail. We also do a little bit in gaming and gambling. And everything we do is Web3 related. So whether that's Metaverses, NFTs, or tokens, it's generally kind of consumer facing rather than back end. So yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, guys. So you can see a very varied but very exciting panel. So hopefully we'll have some really good conversations today. So it's going to be quite an informal chat, ask some questions, have all of your input. I can give you a steer as to whether one of you should take the lead on a question. We'll take questions from the audience at the end, so get thinking, and please do the poll, because it'll be really interesting to see the results of that. And we're also going to ask the panel at the end, in one word, the same question. So we'll see what they come up with as well, see if your answers match. So to start, as I am conscious that a lot of you in the room may not know what all of these kind of buzzwords mean, I thought we'd go through a little explanation of each of these just so you have a bit more of an idea, if you are new to this space, what exactly we're talking about tonight, as conscious that, the Metaverse, NFTs, Web3 is thrown around a lot, and some of you may not know what they mean. I have to caveat that with these are just some kind of generic explanations. They are not word-for-word dictionary definitions. Everyone will have their own opinion. They're all very new, so please don't shoot the messenger. So starting with Metaverse, a virtual world where users share experiences and interact in real time with simulated scenarios. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, a unit of data stored on a blockchain to certify ownership of a digital asset like images, audio, video, or other types of collectibles like books, blogs, tweets, or memes. And then Web3, an ideology that refers to the next iteration of the internet built on blockchain. It promises a mesh of peer-to-peer communication channels and decentralized governance, leading the internet's transition from an information-centric model to a user-centric model. That one's a bit of a mouthful. So, again, I'm just going to urge you once more to do the poll, because I think it would be really cool to see at the end the outcome of that. So I'm going to just keep plugging that. It's up there, the information. And without further ado, let's launch into this conversation. So I'm going to ask a question. Any of you can take this one, jump in, and let's get the ball rolling. So, which of the technologies, Metaverse, NFTs, Web3, are you looking at the most closely in your roles? Can you give us any insight as to how you're looking to implement them and why they are useful to you? I'll throw it over to any of you who wants to answer.
Happy to dive in. So I think out of all of those, most people are looking at all of them in varying levels or to various degrees. At Formula E, we're super excited about what I used to dub the phygital world, which is the blending of the physical and digital worlds. Now we have a nice new term for it, the Metaverse, of which I don't necessarily agree there is a Metaverse, but we can get into the semantics around that. So I think, from a digital fan experience perspective, I think as a sports rights holder, we are looking at as many ways as possible to engage a fan base. And, in a stadium, there are only so many seats. At a venue, there are only so many seats. How can you continue to engage people from home in more meaningful ways and give them genuine experiences with a sport that build loyalty, et cetera, et cetera? So I think that's the one we're probably looking at the most.
Yeah, I'd kind of build on that. So I've done some work. I do quite a lot of work within the tennis world. And so earlier this year, the Australian Open actually mirrored their event in Decentraland, a very decentralized metaverse. And we were working with their kind of their management team. This was last summer. COVID was obviously raging. And we kind of took the guess that, come January, COVID would still be here. And people wouldn't be able to go to Australia, and actually within Australia, between states, people wouldn't be able to travel. So rather than the world go to Melbourne Park and the Australian Open, we decided to take the Australian Open to the world and put it into a metaverse. And Melbourne Park, unlike most of the other slams, is very Australian. There's barbecues, there's DJs, there's kids areas, there's paddle tennis, you name it. And we recreated that with footage, with gamification, with the ability to meet players, with the ability to interact with other tennis fans. And we mixed that with a number of NFT activations as well. So I kind of very much echo your thoughts. It's very early days, but sport in particular, I think, has enormous potential when it comes to Web3.
And as a comms consultancy, we're not necessarily looking to implement it as a business, but we've got touch points with many of our clients. I think for us, NFTs has probably been something we've got most experience with to date. We've worked with esports organizations that are trying to create unique one-off assets that kind of build loyalty with their community. We've got a collectibles company, and to use your term, they use fidgetals as well. So they want to be seen as an innovative brand. More difficult to say after a couple of lagers, that are merging physical collectibles with digital assets for that, the specific audience that we work with. So it's not something necessarily that we're doing for the business, as I say, but something that we're getting more experience with as clients dip their toes into the water.
similarly, as a boring consultant, right? Like we don't have a sort of metaverse or Web3 strategy ourselves, but I think the thing we look at the most for clients is the metaverse, just on the basis of some of the regulation that people are talking about bringing in for that, and whether or not existing stuff matters for it.
Yeah, I think we try and look at it through the lens of being a translator of what these terms mean and how they might affect a business on different time horizons. So clearly there were some deals to be done around the Web3 and NFT space, and that required some more immediate attention. But I'd say the thing that I'm particularly interested in is the emerging metaverse technologies around immersive media, 3D modeling, virtualization, and things that may come through in 5 to 10 years and fundamentally affect the broadcast product of sports, which is the sector I work in. If you think about where the revenues lie in the global sports industry, they still lie predominantly with the media rights. And if that property is fundamentally changed by being able to take motion capture technology, embed that motion capture into a gaming engine and transport and transform the actual product of live sport, and then you're talking about something transformative, but it's not going to happen next month. So how does the industry prepare, and over what time horizons? What investments make sense now? What investments make sense next year? And the timing of that is really important.
Do you see that as a threat to the broadcasting business, or do you see that as potentially complementary?
I think it's an opportunity. We have a generation of people habituated to interactivity through gaming. They don't, and it's awful when old men talk about their children's media consumption habits on panels, but children don't consume media in the same ways as we once did. But if I take a simple example of motion capture technology can now take a game of tennis and project that onto a hyper-real scenario, a gaming environment, the surface of the moon, whatever it may be. People can then interact with how they choose to watch and engage with that. They can put different clothes on the players. These are possibilities which actually sound quite exciting to an audience that's been habituated to that form of entertainment. So is it a threat or an opportunity? My natural optimism is that it's an opportunity, and it potentially introduces a new class of media right.
I'd just like to say phygital. I like phygital. I'm sad that we went with Metaverse. So, Charlie, I'm gonna direct this one at you. So, we've just talked about the value of the various technologies, and I'm conscious that you mentioned that you also work still with Web 2 and have been through a few waves of various different technology kind of disruptors. What do you consider to be the disadvantages or tensions that exist between those kind of existing technologies that you've been looking at for a while and the development of the likes of the Metaverse, NFTs, Web3, crypto?
There's a ton of tensions. Not least the immense volatility of the speculation involved in cryptocurrency, which is just disrupting everything. Leaving that aside, and I'm sure we'll come on to it. There are other tensions around, I guess, IP. We've got a legal audience here. I spoke about generative content and content engines where AI is being trained on images and videos to create new versions of content and IP. Is it genuinely new if it's been trained on someone else's IP and it's spitting out supposedly new content? Other tensions, I think, exist in trying to reconcile a native audience that you do have for things like crypto and gaming with a more mainstream entertainment audience. How do you draw a Venn diagram that includes both parties? Because I think they're pretty different at the moment. Those are just three to mention.
I'll dive in on NFTs as well, because I think that people assume that the sort of the gaming audience ultimately is NFT adopters, right? Well, to be honest, that couldn't be more far from the truth. If you talk to anyone in the gaming industry, they're probably like me, extremely skeptical about NFTs, because us in the gaming industry and me myself have grown up trading digital assets my whole life through video games, and I've been a part of in-game economies where items I've owned I could theoretically sell and make real money off, right? So the NFT technology hasn't really added any value to the gaming industry from that sense, because we can create our own economies in the games world anyway. So I think there's a lot of tensions, is probably the nicer way to put it, between the kind of the NFT technology, what people thought was going to be adopted, and the gaming industry where it's not really being adopted. And the reason that's created tension is if you look at NBA Top Shots, they couldn't have timed the launch of NBA Top Shots better. It was right in the peak of when everyone was really excited about this new technology of NFTs. They sold a shed load of digital cards and whatnot. And then, a year later, everyone was like, well, what do I actually do with this card? Like, I've got this card now, and no one actually really cares that I've got this card, and I can't really do anything with it.
Parade it around a decentralized.
So, well, exactly. The next point is, people were looking at utility. How, utility is the buzzword now in NFTs. How can I make that shot from Michael Jordan in the playoffs final actually worth something? What can I do with that? And everyone turns to gaming and goes, oh, well, that will get you X in a game. But the games industry is going, we don't need this. Like, we don't need NFTs to do this. So now people are trying to find more innovative ways to introduce NFTs and create utility around them. So there's a big tension there with that tech.
And I think it just shows you how far apart brands are from the audience they're trying to reach, which is what we're finding and what we're trying to guide our clients through. From the audience's perspective, they're negative, they're skeptical. To Kieran's point, it's something they've been doing for years. The brands see this as an opportunity to grab an audience, engage them. How do we retain them? Oh, well, we'll just do this. But the audience know it's a cash grab, or it's not adding any real value. And I think that's probably the bigger issue at the minute.
I think. I mean, the industry hasn't done itself any favors. That is for sure. And the speculation point you raised is a big issue. FTX last week, for instance, I'm sure everybody's aware of. Is another stain on the industry. But the underlying technology is, I think actually is quite transformative for gaming. I think when you think about a metaverse and you think about this ability of, there's certainly not going to be one metaverse. There's going to be many metaverses, right? And it's way beyond gaming. Gaming is a very logical step because there are already 3D environments that the generations below us are being brought up in. But really, the metaverse is much more than that. Yes, it includes gaming, but it should be for socialization. It should be for work. It should be for all aspects, or a lot of aspects. Maybe not all aspects, but a lot of aspects of life one can dip in and out of and enhance. And then something like an NFT should come into its own because it means you can take your avatar, your identity, you can take your clothing on your avatar, you can take your achievements in the real world as well as in the digital world with you from one environment to the next environment, right? And there's a long way to go, right? Interoperability is not there today. Interoperability wasn't there with Web 2 for many, many years, right? And it took decades to get to a point where that became more seamless, and it's still not completely there. So for me, it's super, super early with NFTs, and the problem is the speculation piece drives either ill-considered, collections, or worse, pure money grabs. But actually, what it can do, I think, is enormous, and not just for gaming, but it's very early.
I agree that it's transformative. I disagree that it's logical for it to go into gaming. But I think it's super transformative from a sporting perspective when you look at viewership experiences, you start to delve into that digital fan engagement piece. I'm fully not a skeptic on the technology and think it is super interesting and, as you say, arguably transformative. I just don't think it actually is a logical step to go to gaming because I don't think the gaming industry needs it.
It depends what technology you're talking about. When you're talking about the metaverse, there's a whole tech stack that's required to do that, from the computing power that's enabling it, to the chips and processes, to the haptic gloves, to the virtualization tools, to the 3D engines, to the blockchain and ledger capability in the crypto world. That, by the way, it's not a necessary, conclusion that the metaverse, in whatever form it takes, will be powered by cryptocurrency. We can still run it on fiat. But there's a whole suite of technology, so it's very difficult to work out which ones and in which order and in what time horizon they'll emerge.
I agree with that, and I think if you look at the metaverse space, I would argue, actually we're already interacting with it to quite a large extent, even, with mobile phones, waking up first thing in the morning, checking your messages, there's a blurring of digital and physical, right the way through to centralized games, which, generations below us are spending an enormous amount of time and money in, through to augmented reality, virtual reality, and decentralized metaverses. And there'll definitely not be one metaverse. There'll equally definitely not be one type of metaverse. There will be many, right? And I think the challenge, you've just said, actually, I don't think the gaming industry needs NFTs. Well, I can understand why the gaming industry probably doesn't like NFTs, but the question is, what will the consumer demand? And, is there a pivotal change taking place with younger generations that actually they want ownership, they want control, and they want the ability to interact with brands on a completely different basis to how we've interacted with brands. And I think that's what, a lot of businesses and people who are looking into this space and a bit more forward-leaning are thinking, is this a threat, or actually is this something we've got to embrace and we've got to learn about now?
Some very interesting and differing views there. This is what we like to see on a panel. So just to move on slightly, I'm sure we'll come back to kind of that side of the coin, but I'm going to move on to crypto now, as it's been mentioned a few times, and I think at the moment it's kind of gone by the wayside, whilst Metaverse and Web3 is the buzzword absolutely everywhere. So I guess crypto could be a whole separate panel. It can be kind of discussed in its own right. But it is undeniably intrinsically linked to all of these techs, as we've just talked about. Kieran, I'm going to direct this one at you. In your experience within kind of the world of sports and esports, how do you see crypto interacting with those technologies that we've just talked about? Are these technologies sensitive to crypto, or is crypto less important to what you do and kind of how you see it progressing?
Yeah, I mean, cryptocurrency is probably the tech that I am least excited about all the things that we are talking about, purely because I'm super excited about, as I've said, the metaverse. I'm super excited about digital collectibles and how they'll be traded and how that will develop. I don't see the need for that to be backed by cryptocurrency. And I actually think if you talk to a lot of the people in the Web3 space, they're spending most of their time at the moment trying to create ways for the process of getting a wallet and getting some crypto and then buying these items to be as seamless as possible, to the point where you don't even see the wallet and you just pay with your credit card. Right? That's where the kind of trend is at the moment. And I think the reason for that is because the underlying asset being crypto is potentially as the FTX. I mean, I don't want to put it all on the FTX thing this week, but the FTX thing we can't really ignore. There is a lot of hype, and there hasn't been the adoption for the amount of liquidity these companies have then gone and spent on crazy sponsorship deals in sports. And I think that I think people are starting to see that maybe crypto is not necessary in order for us to explore these super interesting technologies. Is kind of my stance.
Would anyone like to just do a quick one-liner on what happened with FTX for those in the room that might not know what happened?
So, I think I might disagree with what the general position seems to be, which is like FTX, as far as I can tell, has very, very little to do with whether or not crypto is interesting or not. It's like a straight-up fraud. We didn't but it is, right? Like, we didn't say when Bernie Madoff defrauded a bunch of investors, money's not interesting anymore because someone stole some, right? I personally am of the view that crypto is entirely worthless, but I don't think someone committing a fraud means that it as a technology is not interesting. So what happened is a guy ran two companies, took loads of customer funds from one to the other, and then said, sorry, I don't have any of your customer funds, and backed it all with a made-up currency. It's like the basic thing.
Yeah. I think that's fair, and as I say, I don't think that the FTX thing is the reason crypto is. I agree. Maybe I wouldn't go as far as to say worthless, but not the most exciting technology we're going to talk about. But I think it's an example of a company getting a lot of money very quickly because of a lot of fluff and hype, spending a lot of money. For instance, FTX did the biggest sponsorship deal in the history of esports by sponsoring TSM for $210 million over 10 years. That's now worth zero. So that's just an example of the trend that we were seeing in that space.
But I think the other problem with FTX is, that was custodial, right? The whole point of cryptocurrency is it's non-custodial, and you own it. And this comes back to the user experience, and I'm guilty of this. It's such a pain to have, a ledger and take your cryptocurrency offline and put it into this ledger, etc. People have just left them on exchanges. And then you're back to this centralized world where you're trusting people, right? And clearly, in the case of FTX, that's what went wrong in that scenario. But the other thing I would say about cryptocurrency is, without Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain doesn't exist, okay? So cryptocurrencies do have a real utility in terms of running blockchains. Now, there's lots of other cryptocurrencies and tokens which don't, right? Don't get me wrong. But there is a real reason for cryptocurrency when it comes to blockchain technology, which I think a lot of people forget. And again, it gets overtaken by speculation.
I think the other point is, it takes some of the air out of the almost religious zeal that some aspects of the crypto community have around this transition to a sort of bankless way of being and this deregulated, decentralized type of trust-based economy. Because if you've got bad actors, and he was a very high-profile member of that community, it sort of like sets them back in terms of that belief in where we're going.
Okay, so on the subject of money generally, I'm moving slightly away from crypto, once again back to the metaverse. Stefan, I'm going to direct this one at you. How do you see the metaverse being monetized? And that's a very broad question, but very interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so I'm going to take it from a decentralized perspective because I'm a believer in decentralized tech. So for me, decentralized metaverses, the two currencies are actually fungible tokens, and we see that in traditional games, right? V-Bucks, etc. They've been around for a long time. But these tokens actually are, they're exchangeable outside of the metaverse environment. And in theory, they should, incentivize and distribute the success of that metaverse. Because if you hold and you're earning or you're owning that cryptocurrency and that metaverse is successful, in effect, you've got a stake, right, in that entity.
Ponzi scheme.
A participant.
No, Ponzi scheme.
Ponzi scheme. We'll come to that in a minute. And then there's NFTs. And so NFTs enable consumers to own land, own buildings, own their avatar, own basically the construct of that metaverse. Okay, so for me, those are the two, if you're looking at it from a very decentralized perspective, are the two kind of vehicles for monetization. Now, on top of that, what we see is a huge number of sponsors. We've talked about this, mainly in real life, because that's where the eyeballs are, but we're beginning to see that in decentralized metaverses. We're also seeing that in centralized metaverses like Roblox. I don't think that's the future. Right? I don't think just taking billboards and recreating them in the metaverse, whether they're centralized or decentralized, is the way to go. I think the obvious thing to do and what people are doing at the moment is they are trying to recreate in real life because that's kind of the first thing you would do, right? It's the safest thing to do. But actually, we're talking about environments where there's zero gravity. You can do whatever you want to do, right? And so I think IP holders will get more adventurous. I hope they get more adventurous because I think there's so much more you can do, whether it's recreating a sport or a music concert or whatever it might be. And then actually, I think, traditional kind of sponsorship will morph into creating experiences, brand experiences that can't exist in the real world, that really resonate with people, that really engage with their audience. And then hopefully what they can do off the back of that is genuinely build a community and nurture that community. So I think we'll see quite a dramatic shift, hopefully.
I think this is a really important question to get right at this stage. The original sin of the internet was the ad-funded model. Some of the most negative externalities that have been created by today's internet are the engagement baiting that causes teen depression, addiction, to various technologies. That's purely to keep people's eyeballs on platforms longer so they can consume more advertising. And we have an opportunity now with new methods of transaction and ownership to take away that quite sick fight for people's attention, which is actually having incredible negative externalities.
So I accept that perhaps there are some negative externalities from advertising. I think to call it the original sin of the internet is...
Not my phrase, it's Mark Andreessen's.
Mark Andreessen's, well, fair enough. Mark Andreessen has lots of money riding on Web3 working.
He did well out of Web 2 as well.
He did, yeah. Congratulations to Mark. I think I would say two things on that. So I think the first is that there was once upon a time in orthodoxy that advertising-funded models would be the way that the world should and could work, and that you'd have bunches of collectives of people working on products, and that someone would sponsor it or advertise with it, and that would be the way that new things would be created, right? I think there is a question of accessibility around, like, the internet could be subscription and ownership, or it could be ad-funded. And ad-funded means everyone gets, like, mostly the same experience of the internet because you advertise at them. And subscription, as you know, Netflix have found out with their new model, means that, like, absolutely you do not. I think there's, like, another quite interesting thing about this conversation about decentralized or centralized. Everything ends up centralized, and, like, sensibly so, because we talk about users wanting and consumers wanting ownership. Like, consumers want simplicity at the end of the day, and, like, email is a decentralized protocol. You can do whatever you want with an email, but I use Gmail, and I suspect most of you use Gmail or Outlook. Like, it's much easier to use someone else's approach to it, because, like, I wouldn't know the first thing about using email without one of them.
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything you said, and also agree with what Stefan was saying towards the end there. I think, you know, the Web3 world is a little bit too fascinated by the idea of ownership at the moment. And actually, at the end, what you were getting at there is it's really experiential. It's about creating experiences that people can't have in Web 2, and people will pay for that. If you add value to people and create a genuine experience that, you know, people want, people will pay for it. And I think that's the way to monetize. I mean, you look at just some examples of the early Metaverse. Travis Scott holding a concert in Fortnite. That's the one a lot of people know, so I use that one as an example. Like, you know, that was actually free for Fortnite players to engage with, but you could see a Fortnite player wanting to actually engage with that and paying for that, you know, that experience. And I think that's where, you know, the metaverse is really going to excel, as opposed to, you know, gaming, where I don't think it will have as much an impact. The only reason I think it turns to gaming is you look at Unreal Engine and Unity, which are the two biggest game developers in the world, game engines in the world. That's where the tech is to create this stuff. So people have to use Unity and have to use Unreal Engine in order to create this. They don't necessarily need to put it into a video game. They need to create experiences, in my opinion, that the web, you know, not just the Web3 natives, but that everyone can engage with and everyone can enjoy. That's where I think the money is.
And we've actually just started working with a client that I think is going to push the boundaries slightly in terms of experiences. So just thinking a little bit about esports and how we managed to navigate the pandemic, unlike some of the other kind of industries. Live events is like everything to an esports fan. They want to be there, they want to be in the action. But we managed to navigate the pandemic and still give people experiences while they're online. I'm getting to a point, I promise. One of our clients, yet to launch, so we're right on the edge of doing this now, have actually created a virtual stadium, but it won't just be one virtual stadium, it will be multiple virtual stadiums, which brands can get involved in. I mean, initially this is going to be for an esports audience, and they're going to show live esports events, but the actual opportunity and ability to take that wider, you know, you could be watching an F1 race, and not just watching an F1 race virtually with your friends side by side, an event that you probably couldn't go to in real life, but you can get into the actual racetrack and be there side by side. And I think that's some of the stuff that's going to be super exciting in the months and years to come, and predominantly while it will start in gaming, because they tend to be the early adopters, there is mass opportunity for this to become kind of more mainstream.
So that leads me very nicely into my next question, which I am going to point right back at you, Karen, and it is a long one, so bear with me. You can drink your beer whilst I speak. See if you can finish it. What kind of audiences are engaging with these technologies? / what are their characteristics? How important are things like community and engagement for brands wanting to operate in these spaces? And what challenges do they face?
Okay.
Break that down.
So I'm going to speak to it. Obviously, we exist because brands want to engage with gamers. So predominantly, that's the audience that I know best, and they do tend to be the early adopters. I'm listening to a lot of Kieran's points today, and I know it's not all about gaming, but I have to speak from my experience. That's broad brushstrokes as well, right? Because there isn't just a gamer. There's not a profile of what a gamer looks like. And so I think, what was the second part of the question?
It was a long one.
Sorry.
So what are their characteristics? So what are the characteristics?
Okay.
How important are things like community and engagement
Got
for
it.
brands?
Okay. Yeah. So actually, what the brands come to us to ask is actually how can they engage and retain and keep this kind of loyal fan base. And we talked a lot about brands making a cash grab. That's because these guys want authenticity. They want something that's really real. And so what we're trying to do is kind of guide the brands through how can they create something that is relevant and is interesting to this audience. And I think like NFTs has kind of been at the forefront of it because at the minute that's where people are kind of playing around most. We have had some Web3 companies come to us, but they're not quite ready yet, kind of Web3 developers, not quite ready yet. And NFTs are, to Kieran's point earlier, not well received by the industry either. There's a lot of negative comments. I think EA came out at the end of last year and were like, NFTs are the future. And then Q3 2022 call, they're like, so we want to give everyone some really cool digital experiences, but we're not really quite sure what that is. It's going to evolve. So I think, yes, this is kind of where people start in kind of gaming audiences because it naturally feels like a fit and they seem to be like the early adopters and that's where kind of I think people tend to put their focus. But you can't just broad brushstrokes, this is a gamer, I want to target them, and you have to navigate that skepticism and that negativity and work out what is a true value add for them in order to be able to bring them on that journey with you. Did that answer everything?
That was perfect.
I think to build on that, I think there are some Web3 communities that are doing a really good job of engaging with their communities and creating some really buzzy communities, engaging with whatever they're doing. I think the problem is, and as we turn to gaming, because it kind of seems to be the logical step, which I disagree with, if I didn't mention that already. The problem is, if something describes itself as a blockchain game or a play-to-earn game, it's probably a crap game, because if you're having to describe yourself with the technology you're using to create the game, then the game's going to be rubbish. If a game is a great game and it happens to adopt some Web3 technologies in the game, brilliant. That's awesome. You're engaging with new technologies. You're finding new ways to immerse your community. That's really cool. I'm all for that. But if you are just describing yourself as a blockchain or play-to-earn game, I've got no interest in your game because it's probably rubbish. I've heard some really cool applications, which is why I am a skeptic to a certain extent, but I've seen some really cool applications of this tech in gaming where, I can't speak about the specific game because it's not out yet, but games that create items where, because of the blockchain technology and the ledger, you can see who has owned those items in the history of that item's transaction, whatever. If you launch a game and you give some of these items to these huge gaming influencers, your KSIs, your Asmongold's, these huge Twitch streamers, YouTubers, whatever, they play this game. Through the life cycle of that item is going to hold some intrinsic value to that community because, oh my God, KSI used to own that. It's a bit like him selling his old car or something. Those things are interesting. I can see why blockchain technology makes sense there. But they're specific use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. But because a game has to be entertaining, right, first and foremost. But again, we're at a very early stage, right? And it's coming out of not the gaming industry. It's coming out of the crypto industry, which has been driven by speculation and making money, and therefore the play to earn, I think, is just a means to something which is much better and much greater, which is, as you say, it's an entertaining game, and then you integrate blockchain. But I was going to raise something different industry, if that's all right. So Nike, I think Nike's played a bit of a blinder in this space, right? So they've identified very early on they have a customer base who, sneaker culture is a massive thing, right? People collect sneakers, they pay unbelievable amounts of money for sneakers, they're stored in, air-conditioned factories and whatever else. So they've recognized that, but they also recognize they're not native to the space, and they recognize there is a different culture, right, within Web3. So they went out and they acquired Artifact. So for those of you who don't know Artifact, Artifact is 3 guys from New York who gaming backgrounds, but also fashion backgrounds, and they're the kind of Web3 sneaker kind of streetwear brand. Okay, they're hugely successful. They've launched a whole avatar series. So Nike realized that and bought in. Right, Adidas went a different route and trying to go organic. And Adidas, Nike have actually let them get on with it, right? They're not overly interfering with what Artifact are doing because they know culturally that they would probably screw it up, frankly. And then yesterday, Nike have launched a marketplace, which is going to be a bit more of a mass market offering, but it still holds true to a lot of the tenets of Web3, which is co-creation. It's giving IP rights to the purchasers of these assets that they're going to sell. And it's enabling them to create new assets from them, okay? So it's quite an alien concept for a big brand. And then integrating that into gameplay and having other benefits. So again, very early, but massive brand who are being very brave in terms of embracing the technology and really trying to do something which is very bleeding edge.
I think it becomes a marketing question to a certain extent. And when you make these kind of moves, you have to identify whether you are trying to appeal to the native community in Web3, who will smell you out if you don't do it in an authentic way, or if you want to try and encourage some sort of mainstream adoption of these technologies within your existing segment. And that's tough. I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a few months ago with the Professional Bull Riders, an organization that we own. Their audience is Midwest, country lifestyle, rodeo people. They did an NFT deal because their commercial director got it across the line, and they were like, how do we get these people to adopt our wallets? How do we get them to use the wallets and buy our NFTs? And they don't give a shit about NFTs. They're there to watch bulls buck cowboys onto dirt. And so if you try and force that issue with the wrong community, it's just a losing battle. Should PBR be going to the Web3 community? Arguably, probably not your first and most important marketing question. But it is about working out who these communities are and what they want.
Well, a year ago, that might have flown. You never know with the bull market.
I think we're absolutely miles away from your initial question, Kat, but that's probably just how these panels go. And I'm just going to keep going further away from it. So I think what's exciting maybe for the lawyers in the room, especially the IP lawyers who stood in front of me and did the intro, is I think this all comes back to IP, which is potentially exciting if you're an IP lawyer, because I think, and I kind of like IP as well. Maybe I'm just weird, but I think the reason it comes back to that is because let's take just the Nike example as an example. I know the guys that started Artifact, Benoit Pagotto's off-the-wall guy, but he's done amazingly. He's sold to Nike, brilliant. Those virtual sneakers that they're creating are only valuable if you can introduce them into a world that people care about, right? Maybe there's an app where you can sort of see it on you and go, okay, yeah, I might actually buy that, right? But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about genuine immersion and phygital experiences. So these things are only valuable if you can put them into a universe that people care about. Now, good luck going to the big IP holders, your Marvels, your Riot Games, your Activision Blizzards, and going, hey, we're going to make one universe, guys, where you can all put your IP into each other's IP. Yeah, not going to happen, right? So that's where I think that this whole idea, it kind of loses a little bit of momentum, and that's where I just think the idea of a metaverse makes no sense, but the idea of, phygital experiences in lots of different metaverses makes way more sense. And I think that's where we're heading.
I suppose just the only thing I'll say on that is I wonder if part of the question there is like the minimization or maximization question, right? Are all of these experiences going to be us with haptic gloves and VR headsets and sort of sat in dark rooms, sort of talking in Nike's Metaverse, or is it that our phones or our glasses, whatever it is, right? Like just it gets really small, and there are some digital things in the world that technology has allowed for. I mean, I think the latter sounds more likely to be adopted and much less depressing, but I've got no idea, right, what the ultimate thing is. But I think that is a fundamental question.
I completely agree. And that's why Metaverse is such a contested term, because you've got folks like Niantic who have a completely different conception of the Metaverse as an AR lived experience versus, the headset, Meta, Oculus type version. They are contested terms, and we're in a battle. We'll see what the adoption of hardware plays out as.
Yeah, it's definitely an area. I know I've been to events recently where they've talked about this, and it's entirely unclear as to how it's actually going to look. So it's one that we could sit here and speak about for hours, what the Metaverse is going to look like or what the Metaverse is going to look like. But yeah, appreciate we are a little bit tight for time. Just to move on slightly, one of our final questions, I'm going to direct this to Ben as our resident regulatory expert. So in Web 2, some of the most pressing concerns have been privacy, online safety, that kind of thing, which regulators have been trying to get to grips with for quite a while. What are regulators doing in this area and the conversations being had by regulators currently?
So I'll speak to the UK and EU because I've got no idea about the rest of the world. I think it's fair to say that regulators tend to think about behavior, activity, technology rather than necessarily like, is it called Web 2 or Web 3 or whatever, right? So to use some boring jargon, there's a collection of UK regulators called the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum. I feel like I must have got some bit of that wrong, but they have done some stuff on the Metaverse. They've talked about it, but really lots of, and Kieran, you'll remember this, I suspect, from sort of earlier days of UK esports, people would say, oh, we're not regulated because we're new. And of course the answer is like, you're absolutely regulated, right? Like you still have to comply with HR law, or employment law, I should say. You still have to comply with data protection law. There might not be specific esports rules, but there are still general rules. And I think the same is true for the Metaverse or their NFTs or whatever it is, right? Like you still can't steal someone's IP. You still have to make sure that terrorist content doesn't find its way onto your platform or your Metaverse or whatever we call it. So I think they're very interested in that. There's this political interest in do our current rules fit with new technology and new ways of people interacting? I think to much of what we've described today, like we have no idea yet, and we'll have to figure it out.
Ignorance is not a defense to the law. That'll make everyone in here very happy. Although ignorance does sometimes help get things off the ground. So, no, but yeah, 100% right. It is already regulated. It's just there are going to obviously need to be new regulations to catch up and sort of reply to the new technologies that are out there. But it very much is a regulated space.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Okay, so the final question, we are actually now going to do the poll. I'm going to ask you guys the same question that we asked all of the audience before, and then we're going to compare notes. So I'm going to go from Karen through to Stefan. You want to go the other way? Is that so you can copy answers? Come on, we're better than that. Okay, we'll go Stefan to Karen. And the question, just to remind you, is which of the technologies we've discussed today will reach successful mass adoption first? Is it the NFT, the Metaverse, or Web 3? One word answers, please. One word answers, please. Quick fire.
NFT. Is one word, is it?
Okay, because Metaverse is such
This is so many words.
a broad Metaverse.
Metaverse.
Yeah. NFT.
Metaverse.
Oh, split panel.
A brutal day for Web 3.
I'll go Web 3 just to, keep the haters down. Okay, so let me have a look at what very interesting. So we currently have an actual tie with Metaverse and Web3. Woo, Web3! It got in there. NFT, so that was 41% answered Metaverse, 41% answered Web3, and 18% NFTs. So those NFT discussions did not convince the audience so much.
Sorry, guys.
It was the naysayers amongst you that obviously resonated the most. Okay, well, guys, thank you all so much. I think that was really, really interesting. I hope you guys all found that fascinating. Lots of different opinions, lots of things that we've talked about there. Like I said, we could genuinely sit here and talk about this for hours, I'm sure. If you guys do have any other questions, then please feel free. I'm sure all of you will stay, hopefully, for a little while, for a few drinks and for some food. So please do come and bombard them with your questions, because I'm sure they've got a lot more to say. And on that note, we are now going to serve food somewhere, drinks, help yourself, and hopefully we can all catch up, chat, and enjoy the rest of the evening. So thank you all so much for coming.